if a guy thinks for some reason that like, God, this is it. Like, I got to be a priest. Like, there's no other options. Yeah, I don't think this man has the freedom to become a priest. We tend to want things now. That cultural trend is what's most scary. You know, think of Amazon. I mean, like, if I order something off Amazon today, you know, it can be at my house tomorrow. And I think applying that to the faith is very scary. Again, if celibacy is only seen in like a practical sense, like if discerning priesthood and the church says like, oh, well, celibacy is merely a thing so you can have more time throughout the day. I always joke about it. It's like, well, I'd find the time. It's like, well, I'd wake up earlier, I'd stay up late, you know, I'd do what I need to do to make it balance. So it's not just like a practical thing.
In 2026, it's pretty difficult, you know, to ask guys to be celibate.
Yeah.
Welcome back to another episode of Saints in the Parish podcast. I'm Donald Paul, your co-host, and I am very happy to have with me Father Patrick Gilbreath, who is a friend and also is the Vocations Director for the Archdiocese of Mobile, our local archdiocese. So very happy to have him with us. This has been a very long time. We've been trying to.
A couple times.
He's also the godfather of my youngest son. So like we see each other all the time, like.
But not in a professional podcasting way.
Yeah, no, not this kind of thing. So we've been going back and forth for like months trying to. He's got a very busy schedule, so very happy to finally have you with us. So looking forward to this. Got lots of great questions to ask, and I know people, you know, especially men, kind of listening, Catholics, you know, vocations is like a buzzword, but you know. 2026, kind of what does that look like, that kind of thing. So very much looking forward to that. So before we get into that, just, you know, I know who you are. I know about you. You know, I know you graduated from McGill. Mm-hmm. You went to Auburn for
1 year.
For 1 year?
1 year at Auburn.
Okay. And then
right into seminary.
Yeah.
After that.
Went to St. Ben's, where I went as well. Yeah. Graduated in 2015.
Correct.
Went to St. Meinrad.
Yes.
Where I went as well. Graduated in 2019, ordained a priest 2019.
June 1st, 2019.
June 1st, okay. And then you were at Holy Spirit.
Yes.
You're the whole time.
4 years.
For 4 years. And then in 2023, you were named the Vocation Director.
Yeah.
Perfect. Okay.
You got it. I don't have to introduce myself.
Sounds good. So yeah, from your side then, what kind of give us your background up until kind of becoming Vocation Director, kind of your.
Yeah, and like you said, I currently am the Vocations Director, which means my full-time ministry is in the work of not only like helping the current seminarians and the guys who are applying for seminary kind of work through the process and get formed, and I kind of oversee their formation. But another big part of what I do is the like promotion of, you know, like the culture of vocations,
right? Kind
of the big umbrella, and that takes, you know, many various different forms, and even day to day, week to week, it is a little different. We joke about that in the world of vocations directors whenever we all gather, like how our lives are super different. And but yeah, I mean, my work is really, you know, especially with young people, young men, to help like not only like guys discern potentially the calling for priesthood, but I do see, you know, as vocation, that word kind of like implies it's more than just priesthood. There's vocation to marriage, to religious life. And although I don't do as much like directly with that, I do a lot of work just with helping young people discern and be formed to have the potential and the capability to like answer a call from God, you know, when and if, and, you know, in whatever point of their life that, you know, the Lord kind of makes it clear to them. Or sometimes it's not even clear. It's just like a thing that, you know, they kind of hear throughout their life consistently. And then it's just more of a reeling in, of a responding to those promptings. But yeah, like you said, I've been a priest, since 2019. So this is my 7th year of priesthood. I had 4 back-to-back years at a parish in Montgomery, Holy Spirit Parish. I was the parochial vicar, and I was one of the chaplains at Montgomery Catholic High School up there. So I did a lot of work with like the high school chaplaincy. I was the youth minister actually for like a year when there was some transition. So I kind of took that role on formally as a parochial vicar, and then Archbishop Brody 3 years ago asked me to take the mantle of Vocations Director when Father Victor Engels stepped back from that role and got a new ministry assignment. And it's been, 3 years, and Archbishop Rivatuso hasn't told me he's firing me yet.
Hasn't fired you yet. Good.
For now, I'm Vocations Director, and
sounds good.
Yeah, moving along.
Nice, awesome. So everybody, most people know I was a seminarian too. So kind of everybody has their their calling moment, or some people have like a general, over the course of their life, they felt called. But, for you, did you have that moment that God called you, or was it a general calling?
Yeah.
What was that like?
Yeah. So I honestly maybe a little bit thought about priesthood growing up, or even like in the high school years. But really or at least the time frame in my life when I figured out I wanted to enter into seminary was in my post-high school year, in the 1 year I had at Auburn University. And, I grew up in Catholic schools and went to Catholic schools all my life, went to McGill-Tulane, graduated from there in 2011. And, youth group kid, actually worked for my youth minister and Daphne, Jamie Graham. And I kind of did some odd jobs around the Lighthouse and the Alley, the two youth centers at that time. But and besides, the typical old lady of the parish, coming up to me and you're the young man, you should be a priest. Really no major, push or call into the priesthood. Jamie Graham, actually the youth minister, was probably the one that most clearly at that time kind of spoke to me about that. But what happened for me was graduated from McGill, went to Auburn, and in that year, and this obviously happens with I think a lot of our young people, unfortunately, and I'm not saying it's the best thing, but there's definitely moving from an environment of the Catholic school where you're surrounded with the faith, you're in theology classes, you go to mass, all these things, there's different prayer. I think you can take the faith for granted. And that's not like a hit on McGill or our Catholic schools, but it's just the way of the world. So going from that environment,
right,
to the secular institution that is Auburn University, and again, no offense to Auburn or whatever, but it's kind of jarring, and it really does test you a little bit, which is definitely something that I counsel the current crop of high schoolers whenever I'm and have the opportunity to not to take their faith for granted, which kind of to no fault of McGill or whatever, that's what I did,
right.
And so getting to Auburn and really getting clear with myself, with what am I about? What do I want? What are my desires? What kind of man do I want to be? That was the genesis of what I think the Lord, and again, hindsight is 2020,
right?
But those kind of questions that I was asking, that I think every young person should and does ask themselves in that time. Those were the initial promptings and proddings that the Lord, I think, put onto my heart that the priesthood was where I needed to be ultimately. I realized very quickly, in the college setting, just how easy it is to, kind of be distracted, I guess, from virtue and from the faith. And it wasn't even I'm not even saying I had this, I was an atheist for a time. There are certainly situations where that can happen. And you hear about the stories, and I'm sure people in, the parishes and have children or grandchildren or family members who have fallen away in that regard. But for me, it was more just a lethargy. I would go to mass every Sunday, and thanks be to God, I did live with in an apartment with three friends from high school, and that was always our our kind of push to each other. We went to mass every Sunday, so that was that was fun, and that was there. But the way I say it is I guess I didn't have the strongest relationship with the Lord, and so what kind of took over, just kind of some of those temptations and all these things. And it kind of hit me towards the end of that year that I needed something different, that something was needing to change in my life. Otherwise, I would have just felt lost. And I got back from that 1 year at Auburn and at Christ the King, my home parish. That year, Father Travis Burnett, if you know Father Travis, was assigned as the new priest, the parochial vicar. He was just ordained. And Father Travis, for the first time, in my life, kind of modeled for me a lived relationship with the Lord that was attractive, And Father Travis, I think, picked up on it, and he eventually, became the Vocations Director. So he had a knack for that, I guess, as a lot of young priests do. Excuse me. But Father Travis, I think encouraged me and really saw in me this desire for meaning, for belonging, for the answer to those deepest urges that, everyone kind of goes through. And his advice to me was very simple. And if you know Father Travis at all, or anyone listening knows Father Travis, I joke about this, and I tell him this. It's not his personality that won me to the priesthood, because Father Travis can be a little crabby sometimes.
Yeah.
And again, that's whatever. He knows that about himself. But it was his like love for the church and his fervor for like the liturgy, and we would talk about like philosophy, because he was newly ordained, so he would come to the youth group and I would return back, and we had like some of those college kind of nights that they have, and there was just something about him, and I was like thinking with this desire in my heart of like, well, what do I want to do, and then I see Father Travis and I see this contentment and this like newly like given to him like gift of fulfillment and priesthood, and I was like, I want that, I want what he has. I knew there was nothing at Auburn, and again, to no offense of Auburn, but I knew there was nothing like in the secular world and the university life or the whatever that I wanted to pursue. And so he encouraged me very simply just to go to mass, daily mass, and go to adoration, because they had the adoration chapel at that time. Well, it was in the cry room now, but and throughout the summer, I know this is a long answer to the simple question, but throughout the summer, I fell in love with the Lord in a way I had never felt before, and it became abundantly clear that the path forward was, to take a stab at priesthood, at seminary, I guess more accurately, because I knew like the Lord didn't want me to be anywhere else, and I didn't even visit. I'd take guys on come and see visits to the seminaries all the time, like a couple times a semester. I didn't even do that. I'd never been to the seminary before, and maybe that's just my personality. But I applied, and I went with the then Vocations Director, Father Alex Valderas. And if a young man came to me as Vocations Director in like late June, early July, and wanted to be a seminarian in the fall, I'd be like, no.
I was just about to follow up with that, because I was like, I know from my experience, like I had Father Victor as my Vocation Director, and he'd have been like, I really like your ambition. Yeah. We're going to need to like pump the brakes for a second.
Yeah. And yeah, I mean, it's a different, world even from whatever, 10 or 15 years ago.
Right.
Yeah. And it was a lot of things aligned,
Yeah.
like just with Father Alex. And I think he discerned that as well, that, my call was authentic, and just with, Auburn and like my roommates, like there was no major problems with getting out of my contract, and we didn't, like Auburn, it was fine to disenroll, and like so there's nothing, like all these doors opened, which I kept taking as signs and affirmations, and entered seminary, and I was there in the fall. I'd never been there, and I say this, when I'm telling my vocation story, especially to young people, but like to say that there wasn't bad days is, it's dumb. I mean, obviously, like, even as a priest, like, there's hard days, and there's situations that are tough, and just like the human things, and, whatever.
Yeah.
But and to this day, I never, through seminary, through the first, 6 years of priesthood, and presumably, for the rest of my life, like, I have not felt like I'm not where I need to be, which is what you want, and I'm not saying like I did everything perfectly, but like, at least from my experience, like that's the affirmation.
Like, like God's saying, like, you're where you're supposed
to
be.
And I'd say, and I mean, especially in the world of vocations, like, and even thinking of like, priests who leave the priesthood after the first 5 years, which is, always kind of the, the first 5 years of priesthood statistically, there's always that danger. But, knowing guys who have, either been ordained or like left seminary, or become ordained and left seminary and left priesthood, they don't have that contentment, so that's what I like search for with and discern with the current seminarians and with guys, who are discerning and applying, because the Lord will work in different ways and at different times. Like we have guys currently in the seminary. Our youngest is he's 19 now, but he entered right out of high school. Our oldest seminarian currently is Michael Gain. He's he's older. He's 39, I think, and he post college kind of was working in Mobile, and so it's like the Lord. We don't limit the Lord to like an age or a demographic or whatever. But what I think consistently I saw this with myself, and you see this with priests who are, who are good and have discerned. There's no other place that their heart can be. You know, there's a contentment, there's like all these affirmations, and that's kind of what, you know, I look for, especially with the guys who are preparing for ordination.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I remember when I like first felt that I wasn't supposed to be in seminary. I was in my second year at St. Meinrad, so it was my fourth year, and I'd never felt like it before. Yeah. And like all of a sudden, I had that like, maybe like I'm not content.
Yeah.
You know, and it was like, at first it was like, okay, like everybody kind of, you know, whatever, okay. But it was like one of those growing things where it was like, okay, like I really don't think like God wants me here, you know? And it wasn't like I had a bad experience and I hated it, or, you know, it was like, and then it became affirmed to me that like, no, I'm supposed to be somewhere else. Yeah. So I take it that you never had like, I mean, we all have doubts, but like, you know, it wasn't like, there was no like,
praise
like,
God, I need to leave. I mean, nothing like that, you know?
Yeah. Well, you know, I know some guys do have that, obviously. That's not a sign to run.
Sure.
So
that's a whole nother topic, you know, of like the inner dynamics of, you know, seminary. And, you know, to be fair, like, thanks be to God that the church in the seminary formation structure has means and resources and years of experience with helping a young man navigate, you know, those kind of interior feelings. And it's beautiful, like, to see, you know, I'd say the church, you know, again, like, doesn't do it perfectly, and there's things that always can be improved or, you know, discerned or whatever. But I'd say seminary formation, for the most part, has developed very, very, very well in the course of the church. And you know, right now, there's a lot of good and a lot of good resources at the seminaries that we send to, and you know, each man goes through psychological testing, you know, both pre and even sometimes during, and they go through spiritual direction. You know, everyone is given a spiritual director, and it has always been the case, you know. But I'd say now, you know, in today's world, the church does a pretty good job, even from, you know, 30, 40 years ago. In both like the way that the church, helps a man discern and evaluates them for like seminary formation, and then also like gets them to, you know, the point of priesthood and beyond. So
I was always loved the, like, I don't know, I'd call it like checks and balances of like, you've got so many doors to jump through. Like, I remember when I was leaving, like when I like personally made the decision, I had to jump through like 5 different hoops to like, you know, it was like, if God wants me to stay, like he's going to tell me at one of these, like, it's not like I just packed up my bags and like opened the door and like jumped out. It was like spiritual director approved, formation director approved, like house dean approved, like rector met with him. He, you know, it was like so many different things. And I think that the church is very wise, especially recently, like 20 years ago, like 30 years ago, like you could talk to some of the older priests and like wasn't exactly like that structured.
And to be fair, like that doesn't mean, you know, priests who went through seminary during that time or, you know, unformed or ill-formed or whatever. But like anything, like I think there's been, especially in the recent, you know, like landscape of mental health for today, there's been a necessary development. And, you know, maybe you could take for granted things that you could, you know, 20, 30 years ago that you can't now, you know. My follow-up to that was going to be, I think the church has done a really good job of taking like the human formation seriously. Like, I think a lot of our older priests are like super holy, like pray, like very devoted to their priesthood. And I'm not saying they're bad formed human beings or anything, but I think the church seminary now takes really, really seriously the human aspect of, you know, like they have like therapists on staff, like that. I can tell you that probably was not the case 50 years ago. Sure.
You know, because like the whole landscape of everything's changed. And I think the church has done a great job of like addressing, just because you're a human being and you're broken doesn't mean you can't be a priest, but you need to work through things like we all do, you know? And you obviously help guys do that alongside them, but the seminary does that like very structurally, which is really cool.
I give the analogy, like I'm like the principal of the seminarians because I oversee them and pay for everything and, have to wag the finger sometimes. And,
right.
But I'm not immediately on the ground like the teachers, day to day. So that's kind of my role. Like with all the seminarians, that's kind of what I see my role is. But,
Nice. Well, it's a great segue too into my next question, which is, what is the hardest part of being a priest? So now that you've been a priest for 7 years, that nobody really talks about, or you'll never really hear preached about. Like, what are everybody talks about loneliness or dissatisfaction, or what have you found for yourself? And then also like your brother priest, like what would you say is what people normally?
I mean, you mentioned loneliness, and I think that definitely. I mean, and on the one hand, like when it comes to loneliness, there's a sense of like, well, yeah, I mean, priests aren't married, and for the most part, I'd say the majority of dioceses in the United States, like it's not like there's the rectories have 5, 6, 7, 8 priests living in them, like in years past, just because of like a number. So the reality of, especially a diocese like ours, which is so spread out, is like you're probably going to have a time where you're a priest, basically the only priest within miles. Maybe excluding like the city of Mobile or Baldwin, but the majority of our diocese priests are kind of like lonely in the sense of there's no like natural built-in community of priests. So I think that's definitely one of the things I think is loneliness with priest. And what that means is that like priests just need to really make an effort. Like me, I'll talk about my experience. Like I have, every Monday, like the majority of the priests in this area's off days are on Monday. So a lot of us get together for lunch. Some play. I don't play golf, so some of the guys go golf, and then we all meet up. But usually, we'll get upwards of 10 local priests together for lunch somewhere, either in Mobile or Baldwin or different places. So like as a priest, you have to seek that out.
Right.
I have a group of, weirdly, my like accountability, my support group, kind of formally, like it's good to kind of have, some of that. But all those priests are up in like the northern part of our diocese. Yeah. But, with Vocations, I'm on the road a lot up there anyway. So it works out that whenever I'm up that way, like we always get together for a meal or just kind of to hang out or, loneliness is definitely one of those things that I think is hard on a priest. And then just the general, like obedience, not that obedience is hard per se, but it is like, especially as a young man, again, from my experience, you have all these ideas and energy and like, this should be that way or like this should be that way. And so I think that's hard as a priest to have to like step back and truly understand that like, unlike the business world, unlike, the whatever, like it's not about what I think is, always good or what I want or what I would like to see. But it truly is like being open to the will of the Holy Spirit and the will of the bishop, period, like full stop, And obviously like different bishops, and Archbishop Rutuso has done a good job of kind of hearing, some of those as he's in this like learning stage, like hearing some of those needs and things and whatever. But obedience is it can be tough, when especially, you have an idea or you want to do something or, whatever. But kind of having to be docile to the will of, ultimately the Holy Spirit, and then, to like the legitimate like authorities in the life of the church, not just as a priest, I mean, even as a lay person, to the pastor, to the bishop or whatever. That's hard, humility is hard,
What do you find that that's like a stumbling block for guys that I don't remember, I asked that because I don't remember when I was in seminary, everybody always joked about the obedience thing, like, especially like if guys had like a quote bad bishop or something, but like, I don't think we ever in seminary, and my friends that are priests now, ever seriously thought about that aspect. I think that's like a post-ordination, like now you're like in the throes of it. Like we were obedient to like the Vocation Director and like the rector, but like the day-to-day, like my bishop tells me to go here and pick up my bags and like I move here, know. Do you find that as a stumbling block, or is that more like post-ordination?
It's funny because like that example doesn't really happen, ever. Like I can think of like one time, well, it was Father Peyton Plessla, a friend when there was a need for him to move from his assignment in Mobile at Little Flower Parish to go be the pastor in Troy, for a couple months. So that was like the only time in my memory, at least, that I can think of where it was like literally he got, the call. Archbishop Brody told him like, hey, next week you're going to be in Troy, whatever. So I really can't, obedience is more, I think, in the little things,
right.
in the day to day. And I think that's, that's daunting. That's hard because, it's hard to day to day, have to be docile in everything that you do. So, yeah.
Nice. Okay. Well, moving to more the nitty gritty of like vocations and, kind of what you do, in 2026, it's pretty difficult, to ask guys to be celibate. Like that's, everybody knows. I had a class a couple months ago on celibacy here, and it was like, it ended up like, we had like, it basically ended up being like a public debate against me, as I'm like, working through the defense of celibacy, so like even like very, and I don't mean any ill will towards, they all were very well meaning, but like it's a stumbling block for even, not even potential priests, but like for the faithful in general. So like, how do you help guys through that? Like it's 2026, like we have kind of the world at our fingertips, but the church, not you personally, but the church is asking guys to give up wife, children, like all of that. Like how does that work with like them being men? Like how does that fit in?
Yeah. So I personally, I'll attest to that first. Like, celibacy has to be seen as a gift. Like it can't be seen only as like a discipline, like a, something that's put on, or a requirement. I think that's first and foremost, like when it comes to formation and again, in the way, like in my life, like it's lived out, I live it out. Like it has to be seen as a gift. Otherwise, like
resentful. Like
there's resentful there. You're trying to like sneak around it or come up with excuses or, whatever. So that to me is like the first kind of foundation is celibacy is a gift. No, it hasn't always been, like required of priests. And even, like we have, in the unique situations and circumstances, like married priests for different reasons, like Father Shields is, a convert and, but, again, like bracketing that, celibacy is a beautiful gift. And I think the best way, that the priestly spirituality can identify with, it kills me every time I hear, people just say like, well, if priests weren't celibate, like all these issues would be solved. And be like, I don't think so. 'Cause it's an identity, like it's an identity of like truly responding to the call of Christ himself, that says like, there are those who are, he uses, I guess the word eunuch would be the, what in, the average translation of the gospel would say, there are those who have been made eunuchs for the sake of the kingdom of heaven, and they choose that in freedom. And Christ even distinguishes that there are, that there are those who are not capable of it, and there are those who by no fault of their own were made eunuchs through, whatever, some like developmental thing or, some maybe even like psychological, incapacity. But, Christ gives a preference, I'd say, to, those who proclaim and profess celibacy for the sake of the kingdom. And it's a gift because it allows me not only like as a priest to have the freedom, I don't have to, it's going to sound bad. I don't have to deal with a wife and kids, like you're just talking about your kids are sick and they get sick, and you have to, all these things.
Right.
But I will say with that though, like, again, if celibacy is only seen in like a practical sense, like if discerning priesthood and the church says like, oh, well, celibacy is merely, it's just like a thing so you can have more time throughout the day.
Right.
I always joke about it. It's like, well, I'd find the time. It's like,
I remember you telling me. It
was just a practical thing. If it was just like, oh, well, the priest needs, like more hours, like 3 or 4 hours extra during the day where they don't have to go, whatever, play with their kids. It's like, well, I'd wake up earlier. I'd stay up late. I'd do what I need to do to make it balance. So it's not just like a practical thing.
Right.
Again, the language of the gift.
Yeah.
And it's a gift. It's a way that like a man, women, religious or celibate, but like, for the priestly spirituality, it's a way that the man can properly like give himself away and fully like live up to that call of self-gift, which everyone kind of has, and that's expressed in marriage in a good and beautiful and unique way. But in priesthood, celibacy, it's a means for sanctification, and it's I'd say the proper disposition, again, barring those maybe the particular cases, but it's the disposition where a man is truly free and open to make a gift of himself for all, for others, and it's a way that like frees the man from disordered attachments and properly helps like have an interior freedom that also helps with like the life of prayer, that helps with like the spiritual life of a priest, and like you said, in the world of today, it's definitely almost unthinkable, and
especially since besides the Catholic Church, Eastern bishops, but other than that, the Catholic Church is the only church I know of that requires celibacy. Everybody, it's like the way of the world. Yeah. But the church, like, obviously, thank God, has continued in her teaching for the last thousands of years. But
And to be fair, honestly, I don't get that many questions or concerns from especially younger guys, weirdly, with like celibacy as they're discerning priesthood. Obviously it's on their mind.
Right.
But in my experience, it's guys who are a little bit older, who are discerning priesthood later, when they're in that like status, that time in their life where they are discerning, like all their friends are getting married. And that celibacy kind of is a little more of a, like something on their heart. But for the younger guys, the ones who are truly discerning and open, like I haven't experienced it being too much of a inconvenience or whatever. And in fact, it's almost like a gift.
I was actually gonna say, I asked that question because like I know most people that are listening are gonna think like that, but hearing you say that is interesting because I also found that to be the case for me and for my friends when I was in seminary. Like I never remember like discerning before I entered seminary being like, man, I really wish the church would just get rid of the celibacy thing. Yeah. Like it was like, like I get it. Like it makes sense, Yeah. But interesting, when I discerned out of seminary, it was celibacy that made me discern out, not because it was like, man, this like really stinks. Yeah. But like I felt called to not be celibate. Yeah. Not like out of some like human desire, but like, because like you were talking about, like celibacy allows you to be open to all, like at a parish, like specifically, like you have to love your parishioners, like you have been given to them specifically. And I remember in seminary being like, I don't think I can do that. Like I'm not called to do that. Like I need someone specifically that I can love, that can call me to love. Yeah. And I was like, I could quote, do the bare minimums of being a priest. Sure. Like I got the qualities to be like, I could do it. Like, but it's more than that. Yeah. Like it's, and I was like, God's not calling me to that. Like that's not the gift that he's asking me to receive. Yeah. And once I did that, it was like, yep, I gotta leave. Like I got it. Yeah. Like clear.
That's beautiful. One of my favorite books, like spiritual, but it's kind of an old one, but it's kind of a little, I don't know if it's recommended as much in the seminary, not because it's bad, but it's by an author, Father Benedict Groeschel. It's called When God Asks for an Undivided Heart. And I love that image of celibacy, an undivided heart, and that's not to imply that, those who are married or, not taking on the particular vow or promise of celibacy aren't undivided, but with priestly spirituality, like there's such a freedom, with being very clear, with having a heart that is purely set on like being the fertile ground for the Lord to work through. And that's what it means, I think, to have the undivided heart of celibacy. And yeah, like I said, it's funny because in the world of today, that's so oversaturated with like sexuality and just, you know, like all that social media, like, you know, it's just like you're just inundated with, you know, all these like, all these just very hard to shake images and themes. There's a freedom and a reprieve from like that, which I think is very attractive to a young man. And I think that's honestly, like I said, like a positive thing. And especially in the first years of seminary formation, like there's a big focus, you know, we talk about human formation. There's the new thing called the probedeutic year, you know, which is like the stage in the very beginning where they very much focus on human and spiritual formation. But they, you know, part of that in every seminary is they take their phones and they really tell them you need to fast from social media and sort of unplug a little bit. And I mean, again, there's a freedom. Even just like when I do like help with retreats for like high schools, or I was on a retreat recently, the search retreat, like our Archdiocese, and we take up their phones. And, you know, at first, you know, they're like, why are you taking my phone? Yeah. But then after the whole weekend, or, you know, the day without the phones, there's just such a difference, you know. And they, you know, always at first are like, well, I don't, you know, like, but then once there's that detachment and that undividedness, and just they're not, you know, inundated with, you know, whatever, like like things and images and just like garbage. There's a freedom, you know. And again, like I think that's what celibacy offers, is a true freedom and undivided heart, you know, for the priest, where the Lord can work. Yeah.
So you when you're talking to guys, like, I know that the common like rebuttal to like that would be like, it's like degrading to your masculinity to like, you know, and I mean, I don't see that at all. Like, you know what I mean? Well, like, you're just as much of a man as I am. Like, I have a wife and kids, and like, there's more to. I think the church has a great image of like, there's more to masculinity than like Christ as the ultimate man. Was celibate. You know what I mean? Like, and I think the church, frankly, I think the world like desperately needs that image of masculinity.
Well, and it definitely is a misappropriation of what true masculinity is. If, you know, a man thinks that, you know, to be a man, they have to, you know, be this like bachelor, you know, kind of, or even within marriage, like just be this over dominating and, you know, whatever, like kind of husband. It's like, no, like, I mean, think of some of the saints, you know, like John Paul II, you know, Solanus Casey, you know, like I'm trying to think of a couple. Frassati, I mean, like, well, I guess Frassati wasn't a priest, but like just these saints throughout history that have lived celibate lives, these masculine saints, like they're the most masculine men, you know. And yeah, like I don't think celibacy, you know, affronts masculinity at all. In fact, it can, you know, again, like help make, you know, priest and those discerning a more well-rounded understanding of like what you know, the idea of like self-gift is, you know, and how to like conquer yourself. You know, there's that kind of theme in spirituality, like conquering oneself is like the greatest, you know, act of, you know, like masculine sort of like, you know, the guy mind wants to, you know, go and like storm the castle and like, you know, whatever, there's goodness in that. But like the field of your own heart, you know, it's like, I think the first like territory that the man must dominate, must like, you know, must tackle before that they can do anything or exist, you know, and we see tons of examples, unfortunately, in the world of today of men who are not conquered in themselves, you know, and just even men who might have great power, you know, just like are obviously acting out of their childness and their, you know, their desires that are, you know, not good. So it's not, to me, you know, in my experience and just in the world, like it's not a demeaning thing at all. It has to be celibate by the church. You know?
Nice. So this touches more on your specific day-to-day life, but what we have lots of men listening, whether they're husbands or younger men that are, you know, either discerning marriage or celibacy or whatever there is. What would you say? What would you say is the most important thing that they can do now to help, if they're going to be a father, to help their future children? Like I've got a 2-year-old and an 8-month-old. Like, what is something that I should do to help promote vocation? Again, not necessarily just vocation to the priesthood, but openness to vocation in general.
Yeah. I think some of the obvious things, I guess at first kind of stab at it, stay true to the church, just like model for your kids, for your sons, for those listening, what it means to be docile to the church, go to mass, participate in, like the sacraments with your children, like take them to confession even at a young age, even if they're, young where they're not able to go themselves yet, like take them with you, as you go to confession yourself,
Right.
Even like if you have, just like familiarize your family with the church, with prayer, pray the rosary together, take mass seriously. Don't just show up 5 minutes late. Like make it like an experience for them that models, importance. So I think there's that. I think, kind of in the same vein as what we were talking about before with masculinity, especially for dads, just like model what it means to be a good man, for one's sons, show how to, like conquer yourself, show how, a boy growing up, especially as they, get older and kind of get into, the later years of like adolescence and like start like with the puberty and just kind of like getting mature, like in and of their own right. Just model like what it means to be a man, like taking the masculine heart and how to apply that, in appropriate ways to the work, to the family, because God, when it comes to priests, like calls, authentically masculine men,
right.
Not men who are chisimo or, like I said, overbearing or anything like that. Like God calls true men who are humble and docile and, able to protect and provide, like all that. So just, model masculinity, stay close to the church. And then, other things I think it's important is just familiarizing like one's children with like priest and religious, invite priest over for dinner, involve priests in your life. I mean, like with Will Thomas and your family, it's great to have a friendship. And I think that's important. It's just like showing that familiarity with priest. And, I guess with religious sisters and brothers, it's not as common, in the Archdiocese to be able to have a sister over for dinner. But, I mean, you can, in other ways, like make a trip, to visit the monastery and, in Hanceville or, just like kind of be open to, just like finding ways for priests and religious priests, especially to be involved, in the life of your family and in the life of a child. I think those are kind of some of the important things.
Okay, so what is one thing you would say not to do? What should we not be doing, or what is besides like not going to mass or something? But like, what are some things you see constantly that are like, like you shouldn't be doing that. Like that's really not helping vocations. I think
for your
children.
In general, this is probably with like child raising, but also with vocations. It's just like the helicopter parent, just like, and I get it, and especially like, I mean, there's times and temptations where I'm like the helicopter vocations director, where I'm like, all right, guys, but it's like, just in general, I think the helicopter parent of trying to have an answer for every potential question, have a, like a day by day, like second by second plan for everything that can happen in your kid's life. Like, it's probably not a good thing, like in the grand, like calculus, like it's okay for kids to be bored, it's okay for kids to not be entertained all the time, to have to like really struggle with like finding their way. It's okay if like kids, scrape their knee or bang their head. Like, obviously, you don't want your kid like jumping out of trees and like, like go and rob a gas station. But like, it's okay for kids to, the typical things that you hear, like in trouble. And I think that applies especially, again, for like vocation. Don't helicopter your child's like life of faith, but model, model in your own life of faith, like for families, like what it means to have a good, like life of prayer and just model for your kids, like an example of a good, a good man, a good woman, and don't helicopter, don't like try to dissuade or, I mean, that's, I think I see that a lot, with especially young guys who are thinking about priesthood. The family, the parents say like, well, maybe you could, do this or do that, or, maybe it's like, well, I get it. I get like, and to be fair, the parents should, especially for younger guys, be a part of the conversation, especially for some of the, the practical things of seminary or the financial or whatever. But just allow like allow a kid, a young man, a young woman, to figure out, through a model and witness in the family's life of prayer and discernment, what the Lord is calling. Because ultimately it comes down to trust. Like, do we trust that God's plans can work, and do and does work and are fruitful and will cause us, to be fulfilled. And it's like, do we trust that? Okay, then like God have, like you have my child, like they're yours,
right?
Like,
have you seen this? Have you seen the opposite of like helicopter parents, like pushing vocations and it having like the opposite effect? Like I could like analogously to like parents that like shove the faith down their throats and like they rebel,
Yeah,
because I could see that.
Definitely,
like I could see myself or my wife doing that to our child, of being like, not like you have to go to seminary, but like, hey, like.
Well, I was about to say like the kids in families who are like super in your face about everything probably just wouldn't, those are the ones that would fall away or, like rebel anyway. So,
right.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny. I don't know if I've ever actually encountered that, like a family who's been like, you will be a priest, you will be a priest, you will be a priest, except like,
maybe that's a good thing. I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe
except
not
in like a joking way, but regardless, like, I think it's just about like letting the Lord's will be done for your, for your child's life.
Like getting out of the way and like.
Yeah. And just, again, like modeling, like I think Pope, I think it was Paul VI, there's that great quote attributed to him. The Lord, to be an evangelist, like doesn't ask one to be like a teacher, but, to be a witness, I'm paraphrasing. But in evangelization, in, the promulgation of the faith, it's witness, that is, I think, the more important thing than just, book smarts or,
right.
That it's the witness of faithful and fulfilled life of Christ that, I think can be the most effective thing.
Yeah. So there's and this is just so true when I was in seminary, but there's a stigma that, guys that are going to be priests or guys that are priests are like super holy or like weird or like not normal or like, you'll have those like pictures of like, the guys in the cassocks, like black and white screen, like, and I think that could be a turnoff for a lot of guys, especially like there's such a thing as a normal guy, but like a normal guy, how do you experience that? Like, what do you tell guys?
Yeah. Well, obviously, the John Paul II says this in his great document on priestly formation, but he says that the priest and his personality should be a bridge, not an obstacle, to let people encounter him, Christ. And I think to me, that's a great, kind of like baseline, is the personality of the man, including, some of the human things or the likes or the dislikes or whatever, is the personality of the man, going to lead people closer to Christ or not. And not to say that like, priest or people should, like not be themselves, I guess, but you have to be careful with that language because in the, kind of the world of today, it can be a little dicey, but you know, because you don't want to get into the whole, you know, debate of, you know, like you can do whatever you want, you know, ultimate freedom, you know, whatever. But like, yeah, like again, like the most successful quote unquote priest are the ones who are holy and the ones who are wholesome.
Right.
And that doesn't mean that every priest is a cookie cutter, certainly not. But yeah, like, don't be weird. You know, that's like that
was our mantra in seminary.
Yeah,
like, man, just don't be weird. Like,
stands
just be
true,
normal.
You know, just if whatever. Yeah. So yeah, to me, it's not about like what a guy's into. I mean, certain, you know, obviously there are things that are probably incompatible with, you know, priesthood at the very least. Just like, you know, should a priest be into, I don't know, like buying expensive cars? And it's like, no, you know, or you can think of 100 different other examples. But yeah, I would hope that, you know, the average priest, you know, is modeling and representing, you know, an authentic and well-rounded and well-integrated man, you know, in whatever form, you know, that kind of looks or particularities of, you know, likes or dislikes or whatever.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Just thinking about all the experiences I had.
Don't be weird. You know, that's kind of, it's still true. It's funny.
Yeah. I always, you know, thinking the guys that was very close to in seminary that I'm still like very good friends with, like, one of my best friends in St. Meinrad is the godfather of James, our oldest. Yeah. Like, very different than me. Like, we're not similar by any means, but like, just like very normal, normal guy. Yeah. And one of my best friends from St. Ben's from minor seminary was like in a fraternity, like in college, like, and it was like, I always like gravitated towards that. Yeah. And like, I was always like, like he's going to make a great priest because like, he's just like a normal dude, you know, but like you were talking about with parents, like modeling, like just modeling like what it means to be like a good man. But for like those guys, like modeling what it means to be a good man and a good priest, like when you come over for dinner or like when all the other priests come over for dinner, like y'all are just fun to hang around. Like you're like, it's not like awkward. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, and so like for our children, like, especially when they get older, like just being around like normal priests, like, you know, like we want to be like dad, but like, we kind of want to be like father, you know?
And I'll say, you know, in the world of vocations, again, especially with the younger guys, the world of today, you know, it's hard, you know, even like these discernment groups that, you know, I'll see, and then I'm not knocking on them certainly, but like my best moments of, you know, like seeing a young man like make the connections in their life with like a relationship with the Lord or want to discern seminary, you know, they always come primarily through just like a good relationship, you know, whether that's like we are able to play ultimate frisbee together and just kind of, you know, and then from that, you know, you kind of build a trust and a familiarity where, you know, the guy's like, oh yeah, well, I could see myself in the shoes of a priest, you know, because of this like or dislike. And obviously it's not just about, you know, like relating. I think there's also like that side of things. Like if you try too hard, it's like, you know, like it's all cringy, you know, not just priests, but like any, you know, like teachers or older, you know, adults who like try to get all like up with the lingo of the kids, you know, it's like, I don't, you know, so same thing with priests. It's like, you know, there's an awkwardness with trying too hard as well. Again, my whole thing, it's just be a normal person who's integrated, you know, who kind of knows themselves, knows their like and dislikes. And I think I joke about this, you know, and have to remind myself and others of this, but like young people aren't dumb, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, they might make a lot of dumb decisions and aren't fully, you know, developed to like think things through all the time. And they're still learning like facts but like young people aren't dumb, you know, they can pick up pretty easily. And I'd say even better than adults of like inauthenticity. And so to me, like that's important is relate to where they're at, be yourself, you know, but oneself should be a, you know, in priestly case, primarily at the core, like a man who is in love with the Lord. And then from that, you know, kind of spill over. So there's there's a lot there, but you know, the integration, you know, I think is important, and just kind of knowing oneself.
Yeah. Yeah. So last thing, just, you know, I don't know how, you know, you have a better experience of this than I do, you know, and you could speak more to the numbers, I guess, but like the vocation crisis or like, you know, whatever you mean by that, you know, what do you think, you know, I guess first kind of speak on the vocation crisis thing, I guess locally. So like what's it look like in the Archdiocese, but like, I guess in America in general, because you know other guys. And then how, if there is that crisis, how does like secularism, like commercialism, like consumerism, like our Americanism, like how does that affect that today?
Yeah. Always, it's sometimes hard for me to like qualify and quantify, you know, what makes up a crisis. There's actually a ministry, it's called Vocations Ministry, and it's like one of these apostolates that kind of helps vocations directors and dioceses, you know, like discern through. And they come out every year. I think this is their like 10th year doing a state of the priestly vocations in the United States. And they, it's good data if you're into data, but they kind of break down diocese by diocese. And like, those kind of numbers. And they look at like the number of like registered Catholics compared to the amount of like priests, and each diocese gets like a rating, so to say, of like where they are. And I say all that because like, that's not as important to me.
Right.
It's like, okay, fine. I mean, like from a numbers perspective, you can maybe make the case that there's a crisis,
right?
You know? In the sense of like, well, bottom line, you know, if a diocese, the Archdiocese of, you know, whatever, has this many parishes, you know, like 70 parishes, and there's only like 40 priests, that's a crisis, you know? Now, is that to say that the Lord's will for that place isn't to have 40 priests? No. And that may very well might be the case. And that's a whole other issue. So it's like, yes, there are like elements of a crisis in the sense of like the Church of the United States is different than it was, you know, 50 years ago.
Yeah.
Especially from a numbers and just like a structural perspective. And, you know, you've seen, and fortunately in the Archdiocese of Mobile, you know, we, from that perspective, we've been pretty good. I mean, just from like a priest to parish / parishioner balance, like we're always, you know, up, you know, in the good numbers or whatever. Some are not, certainly, you know, like some, especially really the bigger dioceses in the United States tend to be a lot worse. Like, you know, for a while when I was in seminary, the Archdiocese of Mobile had the same number of seminarians as the Archdiocese of New York, which was great for us, you know, because we had like in my time we were up like the most we had, I think it was like 23 at one time. Yeah. And, you know, Archdiocese of New York had 23. And for us, that's huge. For New York, that's scary, you know, because we have 100,000 Catholics, they have 1 million, you know. Right. So for like over 1 million, for us to have, you know, the same amount as a giant diocese like New York City, it's like, that's not good for them. So the point, the crisis, you know, sometimes can be hard to qualify. What I see more is, just like structurally, like how to best use priest and like parishes. And I think that's the conversation of a lot of dioceses, you know, ours included now, like what's the best way, you know, to make use of our resources, and how can we do a better job of putting our priest, you know, where the people are, where the growth is, and pairing, you know, all these things. All that to say, you know, we're doing good. You know, the Archdiocese, you know, right now we have 13 seminarians, you know, definitely lower than, you know, like I said, in my time, but yeah, like the influences, you know, to that part of the question on our young people, I think play a factor, you know, and not just priesthood and that, but in affiliation with Catholicism in general. You know, the culture of consumerism, the culture of like doing what you want and taking what you want and having things immediately, the immediacy, like the now, like it needs to happen now. I think that's more troubling to me, from a faith perspective too, you know, because even I, you know, like we talked about at the top of the show, like there's definitely hardships with me, you know, like wanting to see a certain thing, or like a vocations initiative, or, wanting to have like 100 guys at my come and see retreat.
Right.
It's like there's that struggle, and then I have to kind of catch myself and say like, well, what am I doing, to get to that point, what foundations of prayer and what foundations of like vocations initiatives am I doing? So I think that, to me, that cultural trend is what's most scary, is how we tend to want things now.
Okay.
And for the most part, like, think of Amazon. I mean, like, if I order something off Amazon today, it can be at my house tomorrow. It's like we want things now. And I think applying that to the faith is very scary.
Yeah.
Because God can do what he wants. I mean, God's God. He can grant, he can grant our prayers if he wants right now. He can heal you, and that's great. But I think for the overwhelming majority of people, faithful people, it's the long, the longer kind of haul, and honestly too, not even knowing, the fruits of our spiritual labors, until the final analysis. And so like that's hard to like square the circle of having that as a reality and truth and necessity of our faith with a culture on the other hand who's very much immediate, like now, I kind of want this or that, or like things move so quick, or like, just the scrolling. It's like, I want more,
Right.
So that to me, and vocationally too, it's like, that sort of like gives a little bit, that cultural kind of trend gives a little bit of permission to a man to sort of like jump over or sidestep some of the good strides in formation that, need to happen, the introspection and prayer and working through, different things and counseling or spiritual direction or whatever that means. Like that, just from a cultural perspective, that's the most dangerous, to me is, wanting that immediate, kind of thing. I think that is detrimental to, vocation, because a vocation is a long run. I mean, seminary takes, like 7 years basically on average, sometimes more. At the minimum 6, but at the bare minimum 6. But I don't even think that's in today's world with like some of the new changes like possible now.
Yeah.
So I'd say 7 years on average, and I mean that's hard. It's hard. It's hard to see something. For a young man, at let's say 18 years old, if you get a guy on the young end of things, to think like for 7 years, the next 7 years, they're going to be discerning and in the seminary system, like it's scary. I think it's scary. And
do you struggle getting guys to like accept that, or do you struggle getting guys to like be open to like vocation in general? Like, do guys basically miss their vocation because of that?
Yeah. No, I think more it's a factor in a reality and like their formation, like wanting to be a finished product, or because I'd say like, the man who recognizes that they aren't a finished product is kind of what you want, I think there's that, and then just the amount of choices, the amount of things, which can be crippling, and I think this is more with guys a frequent thing. Men who, have thought about priesthood maybe, or had that, a seed planted on their heart, or like know a priest that has been an influence in their life. And yet when pushed, it's like, okay, well, if you have that nugget of a seed from the Lord that is pulling your heart, which doesn't happen to a lot of guys. I mean, like, that is a very, a beautiful and a bold, and I'd say an uncommon thing for a man to truly like want to be a priest, not because like priesthood's bad, obviously, but just, the majority of guys I would say are going to be called to marriage, and fine.
Right.
But, when at the end of the day, when I talk to a guy who has something, like an encounter in faith or whatever, a priest mentor, a priest friend, you push them and they're like, well, I could do that, or I could do this. And there's, all these options.
Yeah.
So I think that's another side of things. Just the amount of options that we have can ultimately cripple you, and cripple a young person. And I feel truly like it's a tragedy, for a young person to be caught up in just this world of like, immediacy, and also the world of, the unlimited options, it's like, it's their stall, there's like a legitimate stall whenever faced with all these things. But,
Yeah. Last thing too, kind of going along with that, with kind of the indecision, do you think this was kind of a debate among some of us in seminary, like some professors, like we were all, I don't know if the church has really even ever discussed this like definitively, but do you think, talking about like guys missing their vocation, like, do you think like God desires like one specific vocation, or is it an open call and guys respond?
Yeah, that's always a debated thing. I don't think the Lord like forces one, into a vocation. Like, I don't think the Lord like predestines, like you're going to be a priest, you're going to be a married woman, you're going to be whatever. Now that's not to say that the Lord doesn't call, men to the priesthood. Because obviously he does. And like the natural quote unquote course of things, just like what we're on an earthly level, on a human level, on a spiritual level created for, everyone's created for like self-gift, like I said. And the majority of people, that's going to be expressed through marriage, because that's like, we believe we're a body and soul, and like our bodies have truth and mean something, and the Lord designed us for a certain way. And so like just from a physical standpoint, the natural end of one's, life, one's body and soul is in marriage, right? Where like we can fully, like one can fully participate in, like the Lord's like love that God has for the church in like a fleshy way. And, the love can be like in the Trinity, it can be generated, and a generative love. So yeah, I don't think the Lord, like from the very beginning says you're going to be a priest. Because there is a freedom, that's what the sermon is about. And if, for some reason the Lord puts that call on a man's heart, and maybe prompts him a little bit, and even if the Lord desires a man to be a priest, like I don't think God's going to obviously like, condemn one, or punish or whatever, if they go, especially and become married and have a wife and kids. Now it'd be different if, like on either side, like if a man's called to the priesthood or marriage, and then they just like say nope to either of those and go live this life of sin and debauchery. But, the Lord gives freedom. So I don't think, that the Lord, kind of pigeonholes one into a certain vocation. But certainly like God desires and wants priest and needs priest. So he does call men, and he doesn't call everyone. So that implies that like there is a,
specific call.
Specific call. But, and also too, like that, I think like mentally and spiritually can just lead to scrupulosity. And lack of freedom, honestly, like if a guy thinks for some reason that like, God, this is it. Like I got to be a priest. Like there's no other options, to the detriment of just like their basic human development. That's not good either. I'd say, I don't think this man has the freedom to become a priest, if they think that they're only called to be a priest. There's no potential for them to discern marriage, or it's like, why am I even thinking about marriage if, it's like, I don't know. That's a whole nother, like, I don't. So.
Nice.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, this is awesome. Thanks for coming on, and
it's a great conversation.
Answering some questions,
for
and
sure.
Definitely, just thanks for taking your time out of your busy schedule and coming over here and across the bay and coming to talk to us. And hopefully everybody enjoys this conversation. And if you're a young man in the Archdiocese of Mobile, with no impediments, you're single, and you can reach out to Father Patrick and give him a call, and you can obviously find all your information on the Archdiocese website.
Yeah,
and,
it's the normal way to kind of get with me, email or phone or whatnot, through all the social media and all that.
Cool. Yeah. Well, again, thanks for listening. If you haven't subscribed, please do so. Helps us continue to grow. If you're listening, you can share and rate and review us. Thank you for listening attentively. And I would encourage you, if you're listening and, maybe you're an older person and, your kids are grown, but, I'm sure you have grandkids, don't be afraid to send this to them or talk to them and encourage them, like we were talking about, just witnessing a good Christian life, specifically as a man to another man. But so we'll see you in the next episode. God bless.